Welcome to this AIP New South Wales PEG seminar on success stories from moving university physics teaching online in the age of the pandemic. My name is Christine Lindstrom. I co-lead the group Physics Education Research for Evidence-Centered Teaching, or PERFECT, at UNSW with my colleague Liz Angsman. And I'm also the AIP PEG State Representative for New South Wales. Before we start, I'd like to show my respects and acknowledge the Bedegal people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which our UNSW Kensington campus sits, and also the Darug people of the Upper Blue Mountains, which is where I currently sit, and of elders past, present, and emerging on all the lands this meeting is currently taking place. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic forced education online in a very short period of time, and in the middle of semester or term for many. While this was a scramble, it's not been all doom and gloom. So today's seminar focuses on success stories from moving university physics teaching online. We have 3 excellent physics educators with us to share valuable experiences that can help improve further teaching, not just for the next semester or term, but also for a post-pandemic world. Our presenters today are Associate Professor Liz Angsman, who will present on moving lectures online. We have Professor Manjula Sharma from the University of Sydney, who will present on staying true to learning outcomes, some enduring lessons for online labs. And Dr. Kate Jackson from UNSW, who will present on harnessing the power of synchronous and asynchronous learning. Each of these presentations will be followed by Q&A, so please post your questions in the chat or raise your hand to ask a question live. Now I will stop sharing and hand over to Liz.
Is that showing up now?
Yes, I can see that.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to be telling you how we went about moving the lectures online for Physics 1A. Oh. Yeah, so luckily we had a bit of a head start because we developed web stream lectures which were used first in 2017. So in 2017, projections suggested that we'd need a 5th lecture stream. So a good option at the time seemed to be to introduce a web stream lecture. So this was always intended to be optional. Students could choose to enroll in one of the 4 face-to-face streams or in the web streams. And what motivated us was that lecture attendance wasn't brilliant. We hadn't recorded it until this term when we recorded it. But just from looking at the lecture theatre, you could tell only about half of the students were attending. So it seemed like web stream lectures would be flexible for the students. They could choose to take them from home. And we have rules in UNSW that you're not allowed to roster more people into a room than the room will hold. So that meant that even though the lecture theatres weren't full, we couldn't over roster into those rooms to try and make up the numbers. So a web stream lecture would let the students choose to study online if that's what they'd prefer. So what our lecture streams look like is there's really clear learning outcomes for each of the lectures that the students can see before they start, and they then click onto the interactive lecture. So they're set up to be interactive. In Moodle, they're set up as quizzes, but we have similar things on Open Learning where essentially what we want is an embedded video and then a question. So you can see an example of a typical type of lecture here. They've got a short video to watch and then a question to check that they've understood what's in the video. And once they answer the question, they get feedback. And if they got it wrong, they get a video showing them how to do it. at the end of each of the lectures, we've got a series of problems for them to try based on the material covered in that lecture. So I also have these at the end of the face-to-face lectures, because especially when there's multiple streams, I find having questions at the end for them to practice helps keep all the streams aligned, because you can do these if there's time and skip them if there's not time. We also have predict, observe, explain activities online like we do in class. It's not quite as fun as in class because they can't see what the other students are predicting, but hopefully it meets the same learning objectives in that they need to decide what they think is going to happen before they see the demonstration actually taking place. Okay, so another aspect of this that we introduced this year is course scheduled email. So previously, before each of these web stream lectures, to keep the web stream students engaged, we'd send them an email on every Friday telling them about what they'd be learning in the following week. So in the face-to-face lectures, this would just be done in class by the lecturer, like what we'll be learning this week is. But for the ones enrolled in the web stream, it was done through mail merging. So we figured that since everything's always the same all the time, and you're always sending out the same emails to tutors and students, that we'd set up an automated email system to do that. So it worked really well for the first few weeks of term, and then everything suddenly changed. So the only part of this pilot that we went ahead with was for the online courses and for the web stream emails. But it means that the students get a personalized email each week telling them about what they're going to be learning about. So why we thought these web stream lectures should work is, well, we all know it's been known for decades that active learning works. So we were trying to get active learning as much as possible in an online environment. So by asking questions and getting students to think about what they've been learning rather than just watching an hour-long lecture. And we also know that, well, designed online resources can help reduce cognitive load. So we followed as many of the principles as we could when creating these lectures. So I think Kate will be talking more about synchronous and asynchronous, but I think it's important to think about what you want to do in an online environment and not necessarily just replicate what's going on in face-to-face teaching, because synchronous decreases the flexibility a lot for students. So if you are doing synchronous components, you need to make sure that there's really a good purpose to them and that their students are getting a lot out of them, because it does limit the flexibility a lot. Okay, so did they work? Sorry, this data is a bit old. I haven't had time to reanalyze it for the last couple of terms. So we found they did work. The students who were enrolled in the web stream did a little bit worse in learning gains on an FCI, but if they actually completed the web stream lectures, they did better than the other students. So the problem with the web stream is really getting the students to engage, given that they don't have the time set aside in class, forcing them to engage. Though, to be honest, when you look at the class, just like 60% of the students are there anyway. So there is also this issue with face-to-face and that they're not showing up, so not engaging. They also did well on the exam. If they completed the web stream, they did much better than if they hadn't completed the web stream, which isn't really surprising given that if they've been completing the web stream, they've been practicing answering lots of questions. Okay, so for us, what happened in term one is that we had 2 lecture streams and the web stream running. So 464 of our students chose to enroll in the face-to-face streams and 153 chose to enroll in the web streams. We got through the first 4 weeks. So with our course, we have 1 lecturer assigned to the first half and 1 lecturer assigned to the second half, to each stream of the second half. So the first lecturers just had 1 lecture left to give when our university got shut down. So for that final lecture, One of the lecturers delivered it over Blackboard Collaborate. I was on the other stream, so I had a video which my students watched, and then we used Blackboard Collaborate as a discussion session. And then we were just about to go into the second half. So for the second half, we just told all the students to use the web stream lectures because they'd already been developed and tested. So this was a relatively easy transition for us. So the student feedback, our students were asked in their feedback at the end of the course to answer the question, what have been the best elements of studying online? And you can see they liked that they could study at their own pace, and they liked the content related questions after each video to make sure that they'd understood the concepts. Some of them commented that the videos were a good length, so we kept our videos short, about 5 to 10 minutes, depending, some shorter, some a bit longer. And they liked that they liked the summary at the start, like the list of learning outcomes, so they knew what would be covered and they could revise it easily if they needed to. So I did receive a few emails from students straight after the transition asking for single long videos of the lectures, because I think a lot of them prefer just to sit down and watch the lecture and not be forced to answer questions through it. So I think this is another example of where students don't necessarily like what's good for them, because it's difficult learning new content and thinking about it deeply and properly understanding it. So future plans and benefits for us. We're currently making web stream lectures for Physics 1B, which will run in our term 3, which starts in September. We plan to continue to offer the web stream as optional in future years. I suspect in T3 we'll only be allowed to offer the web stream because I suspect we won't be allowed to open up the large lecture theatres. But I also suspect that given that more students have now experienced online learning, more students will choose to enroll in the web stream. One of the benefits is that other academics in the school have realised how much work goes into creating online resources, which they didn't seem to have any idea of before. Another advantage of having the web stream lectures is that because we've got multiple lecture streams and we have the same assessment across everybody in the course, we really need the lecturers to keep up with where they need to be to ensure that that there's good alignment between the assessments and the lectures. So having the web stream lectures shows the lecturers who are giving the face-to-face lectures how they can present the material to stay on track to where they need to be. And yeah, having these already developed for 1A was really priceless with the sudden move to online. It actually means that in our school, because about half the lecturing is for first year, we've had a reduction in everybody's loads because there's now less lectures to give, which is leading to its own problems, but it's probably a good thing. Yeah, and let's open it for questions.
Thank you so much, Liz. Do we have any questions? So I can start off by asking a question. So given that both 1A and 1B are now going online, what's the thought for the post-pandemic world when we can actually meet again? Do you think there might be a push towards encouraging most students to do this online and then just coming for tutorials and labs?
Yeah, I suspect that there will be a push that way, but I think we should probably oppose that push. I mean, I really think that I think it's really important that it's optional, that students can choose which one's most suitable to them. And I know Asia's been doing research into the emotional engagement of students, and they're not as engaged emotionally with the online material as they are in the face-to-face lectures. So I think For first year students who've just started off at uni, lectures are an important social environment where they get to meet people and discuss with their peers. So it'd be a pity to see them go. But I do suspect that we're going to be pushed that way. I mean, we were already starting to be pushed that way because they don't want to build new large lecture theatres and everything.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, we're up to 10:50, so I think we might then move on to our next speaker, which is Professor Manju Sharma from Sydney Uni. Do you want me to share your slides, Manju?
Yes, please. Yes,
yeah.
please. Yeah, and I'll talk from here. I'm sorry I'm not able to share the slides.
That's
Thank
okay.
you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming. It'll be very interesting to hear what you've done at Sydney. Okay, so can you see this?
Yes, I can. Can everyone else? Unlike UNSW, we really haven't had an inclination to go towards online teaching. So we are possibly the least prepared in terms of having the infrastructure, the thinking to go online. And I've been looking after the labs for the last couple of years, but I've been doing research into lab teaching and learning for 30 years now. And my talk is about staying true to the learning outcomes, some enduring lessons that we can take on from our move at Sydney anyway, where we're not prepared and had to do this going online, and with all the research bases that we have. So next slide, Christine. One of the things that I've always worried about, what are the learning outcomes for experimental labs? I find that labs are torn between teaching content and developing skills, and now in the recent years about getting students ready for the workplace. And there's a lot of literature in there dating back to about 30 years since the time of Schwab and Driver and so on. So in the last couple of years, while I've been looking at labs, our learning outcomes have, and I've taken control of them in a way, I'm in charge of them. So I've got full authority over them and how do I change them and so on. So our lab learning outcomes have changed to 3 things: conduct, analyze, and interpret. And these things put the learning of content in the background. So next slide. Yes, just click again, Christine. Yeah, and this is an example of a typical experiment that we had before going online. The learning outcomes would actually be undertake experiments to whatever it is. The concept comes second. The second would be something focusing on something that's particular about analysis about that experiment, but riding on the fact that that relies on a whole lot of other analysis as well. And the last one is about explaining the results, including, you know, unique things about each experiment and so on. And then because they are so process-driven, these learning outcomes, how could we stay true to this when we do move on to online, when we were not prepared and we were not in that round at all? Next slide, Christine. So one of the things that we had done to make things easier for the students and the tutors and operationally is on our Canvas site. And this is a snapshot of our Canvas site. We've organized things this way. So the first column is the lab session week. The second one is something that we call skills, chapters, and pre-work. So stuff that has to be done before the students come into the lab. The next one is about the manual, so the student notes. The last one is extra material that they need. So before COVID, we had 3 weeks of face-to-face labs. In week 1, everyone in a regular class, about 600 students or whatever it is, did the same experiment. Week 2, the same experiment. Week 3, they start getting rostered. So different groups of students do different experiments as they go through. The last column actually has very short 3-minute video clips, which actually just give an idea of what the equipment is like, so that they, not the whole experiment, not teaching concepts, but it just manages the cognitive load of the students. And what we do is we release these week by week so they don't see a flood of the entire 12-week program when they come in at the beginning. They see week 3 and then the others are there, but they're shaded and they're not published beforehand. We were hit by COVID and we had the first case in one of our labs at Sydney University. And so we just had to shut down at that instant, and we decided to just go online. After that, we were not having any of the tutors put in the situation where there could be a student in there and they would be put at risk as well. So next slide, Christine. Now, what is the worry? What made it easier? Retrospectively, thinking back, what we had done was in the chapters, which was in the first column, which was the pre-work, we had started to write up and had actually refined 2 pages which were about technical skills and graduate skills. So instead of an entire booklet on uncertainties, processing data, and so on, we had broken that down into chunks of a couple of pages each. And we had the tutors write this up. So they were written in the tone in which a tutor would tell a student, how do you compare results? A tutor would tell a student, how would you work with data? Ethics, working in groups, how do you draw diagrams? All of those things were there, and they were ready for the whole. And so this is something that was in the pre-work, and there were short Canvas quizzes on the simple questions, absolutely simple. But the students would read it, and it was just sort of bonus marks, 2% or something over the entire semester. We found that this actually wove the whole thing together, because in the face-to-face labs, the tutors were saying this. In online, they would not be able to say it in the same way. So retrospectively, this actually made the whole thing hang together. Next slide, Christine. Now, going back to our Canvas page again, the first 3 weeks were face-to-face. Then it happened, then what we did was for 2 weeks, we actually canceled all the labs, giving us time to prepare our online material. And then week 3, we had a mid-semester test anyway. So we had 3 weeks of no labs. And then we had 4 weeks of online labs. And what we did was in the face-to-face lab, there's pre-work, and then they come in and they do 3 hours of work. So we broke that up into a 1 hour plus a 2 hour. The 1 hour was things that they had to do beforehand. 2 hours was during the lab. Next slide, Christine. And so in that 3-week period when we were preparing for online, we had our tech staff and the tutors and myself get together in meetings every second or third day. We designed a Google web page in which we sort of had the tutors taking data, recording it, them designing home experiments, them taking videos of how the data would actually be taken, and all the other bits and pieces. So all the student attendance files, everything went onto this Google page that was available for everyone to actually see, and it really made a difference. The tutors also got on board, and the tech staff, they were giving tips to each other, things like have snacks and drinks at hand, because you are sitting at a desk and you don't get a chance to get a drink and you get a headache. Whereas in a face-to-face lab, you can just go out there into the kitchen in the back and have a drink, right? So next page. So that collaboration made a big difference. Now, having a closer look at what we actually did, and I'm going to talk really fast because I've got to cover lots of things. It's very exciting. So the second column was the 1 hour in which we actually had the students conduct. That's where the conduct of the learning outcomes comes in. The third column is where they did the analyze and interpret. The third column was synchronous. So this is where they came in, they had a tutor, and they had the same tutor that they had in the face-to-face in this session. And then the last column had, other stuff that was in there. There's assessments that lines up with all of this, which I am not going to talk about. Christine, the next page. So what did we do? In the 1 hour beforehand, we focused on the sense of belonging and engaging students. So we gave them a video task, and the video task sort of had things about uncertainty, how would you change the variables. These are videos drawn from Veritasium, and a lot of, we told the tutors to select videos that were actually shot in Sydney or Australia or shot on our campus. So there's a fair few videos there, especially this one, Gyroscopic Precision, which was shot, some of it was filmed in our lecture theaters. The second part that they had to do was a home lab, and for both of these, we actually said that you're at home, we know that you're with family members, work with people, get their ideas, but we want you to write the names of everyone who provided information. So this becomes a family task or a task with other people, you're not doing it alone. So the sense of belonging with whoever they are within a home, teaching them ethics and how to do referencing, and it also sort of eased the issue of plagiarism and so on for us a bit. So the Veritasium task was the same for everyone in the class, but for the home task, we actually divided the classes up, and there were different versions given to different people with different tasks and different numbers as well. Next one, next page. Right, so what was in each of those ones? So this is the 2-hour during the lab session. So if you look at the learning outcomes, and this is thermal physics, which Aisha actually designed, the 3 learning outcomes are out there. What we did was we changed the first learning outcome from undertake measurements to blah, 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 blah. It became describe experiments to blah, 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 blah. So instead of undertaking, they were describing, right? Now, for each one of these, there was a video, and on the panel on the right-hand side, you can see the panel of the videos. These people would actually, the students would be getting one of those links only for their experiment. And because these were rostered, they would be doing different experiments. And the tutors also took different data sets. So students would be getting different data sets. If you were doing collisions and there are 5 groups there, each of those 5 groups would actually be getting different data sets. So that reduced the plagiarism issue a bit. And all the films, a couple of minutes each, were all shot in our lab. So the face-to-face students had already seen the environment, they knew the tutors and the same people. And when they did the films, they actually said, I'm doing this, I'm taking the data in your data file, you'll actually be seeing this. Now in the notes, what we did was we had pictures of what would be in the film, so they could connect the two. This was managing cognitive load and getting them to collaborate amongst the team members. We color-coded it so that the green ones were what was actually done on the video by the tutors, and the yellow ones were what the students had to do. And so we had shots of whatever was in the film, in the videos, but we also had shots of the data pointing them to where to look at in the data files that they were receiving. Next slide, Christine. Now, after they did that, I think I've deleted the slide. After I did that, we actually had them fill in a logbook template. And so the video task came up there, then they had the home lab, and then they had the checkpoints for the experiment, all of the names. So the conduct, analyze, interpret, all of those 3 things actually got mapped out there. And we followed Big's constructive alignment. Operationally, it was quite complex, but it aligned with the learning outcomes, and the kids, the students actually picked up on that. Sorry, I should not be saying kids. Picked up on that alignment and the fact that they were learning something very, very, it hadn't been reduced in the content. Like it hadn't been downgraded because we had to go online. I think that was important for us. Next slide, Christine. So that's it. And how am I going for time?
It's okay. We have a little bit of a buffer. So yeah, finish off.
Okay, so that's it. So that's my acknowledgement. So I've taken you through that. Now the whole works is that we've managed to stay true to the learning outcomes. A lot of it is drawn on literature, and in coming back to the students, they've actually come back and we haven't got any data analysis, but so far there haven't been major complaints, rebellions, or feedback that says it's not working. And most of our students have completed all the tasks and have moved on. So our target was getting 80% through the system, and I think about 90% have gone through the system and done really well. That's it. Questions?
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Manju. Yeah, so we will open up for questions. So when does your semester end, Manju?
It's just ended. We've just finished the replacement test for the students who had to move international and this and that. We've got students in the US doing the labs and all over the world right now. Yeah, and gone back into the country in Australia.
So if you have students all over the world and you have this synchronous part of the labs, how are you dealing with that in terms of the different time zones?
They are dealing with it, not us. I think what happens is when I'm reading all of the literature and the things that are coming by my desk, there is, if people are doing valuable tasks and it ties into what they were agreed to, and people have made the effort like us to make sure that their learning is not compromised, they have adapted and they've actually come back. One of the feedback from my tutors is that the students have been so understanding and respectful, because sometimes the technical issues, this and that, they haven't complained about those things. They've actually come back and said, I couldn't make this, what do I do? Here's another session. And we've got replacement sort of things happening as well. So they've just chipped in and done the bit. They've risen up to the challenge, which is really wonderful to see.
Yeah, it's quite impressive how that seems to turn up in so many different areas, that, you know, everyone's really trying their best and everyone understands that this is a difficult time. And as a consequence, it actually worked, you know, a lot better than we'd feared.
Yes, yes. And we're actually finding that student applications for special considerations have not risen as much as we had thought they would.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now I do have one more question, and that is, are you planning on collecting any more data from the students to evaluate this move online with the labs?
So we've actually got ASH's data that Elizabeth was talking about, and we've got ASH's survey occurring in our labs as well. So we've been able to get human ethics modification and get that going. But we've also got with this project going where they are completing the lab reports this week, the students, and they're completing a survey, and that survey is being run at Melbourne, Monash and Sydney. And that's excellent. Yeah, so that's going to be looking at the different skills and how the students rate those skills in this context.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Manju. I think we'll hand it over now to our last speaker, which is Dr. Kate Jackson at UNSW.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. And thanks, Liz and Manju, too. They were excellent presentations. Let me pull up my slides. Okay, cool. So I'm going to be talking about how we moved our, I guess, tutorials or problem-solving workshops is what we call them, and how we moved them online after the whole coronavirus thing came about. So I've titled my presentation, Harnessing the Power of Synchronous and Asynchronous Learning. And I did that because we didn't just move everything to synchronous or asynchronous. We had a bit of a combination of the two. So, whoopsie. So a lot of the data that, or a lot of the information that I'm about to present is from a single paper, but they had a literature review in that paper. So I've listed a lot of the references down here, of which I've read a lot of them. So that's why there's so many references on the slide. So I guess I'm going to really quickly just, talk about asynchronous versus synchronous and where sort of the literature is sitting on that. And I guess the punchline is that there is no general consensus about which one is better, but there are benefits and disadvantages to both of them. So asynchronous is really good because students often state things like it's really convenient for them because they can access it at any time. Although, like Manju was just saying, students will access synchronous sessions if they find them really valuable to them. But on the whole, asynchronous is really good for, I guess, convenience. Also, asynchronous sessions and asynchronicity is just supports different learning styles. So you can do things like provide a variety of resources that students don't all have to access simultaneously. It accounts for different pace, even different cultural backgrounds. English as a second language students, for example. It also, I thought this was a really neat little point, it promotes effective teaching practices. And by teaching practices, we mean things like like I was just saying, not everyone has to access material at the same time to achieve learning outcomes. It encourages co-construction of knowledge. If you have discussion forums where students have to talk to each other. Also, it increases time on task, which by extension means that students have to reflect a little bit more and they have to think a little bit more about what they're posting on forums and things like that. Also, it promotes equity, so it allows for the admission of multiple perspectives from student cohorts. I've also got here heightened levels of peer interaction, and when I say peer interaction, we're kind of talking here about cognitive interactions and social interactions. So even though asynchronous, we have the sort of delayed communication interaction, students still, I guess, they still feel that there is some sort of social presence there. Something is better than nothing in this sense. But the teaching presence is interesting too. And so long as a teacher is actively engaged, whether that be the teacher themselves or the teacher via teaching assistants that are helping answer forum posts, for example, so long as that is happening on a regular basis, then students are actually feel like there is a teaching presence, which I think is really good. But I guess the crux of that point is that the teacher has to be actively engaged and making sure that they're staying on top of all these things. So when we move to synchronous though, there is lots of benefits to synchronous communication. It is real time. Though I've written here lower level of cognition, and what some studies have found is that because the transmission of information is so quick and you don't have that time to reflect, that there is a lower cognitive presence in synchronous communication, though there is that higher social presence. So students might not be thinking as much, but they do feel really connected to people. But the whole point with that is that they only feel the social presence if they're actually engaging with it. So this is what the last point here is, adopters and non-adopters. You have the two parties, and we definitely saw that when we moved to some synchronous sessions online, is that we had people who were totally all for it and attending really regularly, and they got a lot of benefit as opposed to the non-adopters. So I guess on the whole, for fostering a social presence amongst student bodies, the combination of both synchronous and asynchronous communication seems to be the most effective. But is this at the expense of learning gains? And the reason I say that is because some studies have, I guess, assessed the how much benefit students found from getting feedback on assessment or help on assessment via asynchronous methods versus synchronous methods. And some studies have found that there is no difference. Students performed the same on assessment items, whether they had synchronous or asynchronous help, but some studies have found that they performed slightly better when they had synchronous help. So I guess the jury's kind of out on that one. And another interesting point about synchronous communication, though, is that it often starts out at lower cognitive presence. And what that's basically saying is that students use synchronous chats to begin with as like a, hey, I'm just getting to know you kind of thing. But once they've sort of jumped over that hurdle, then they can start moving into more, I'm actually going to start talking about the content. And another interesting point that I came across was that synchronous learning may favour students with a higher cognitive ability. And that's kind of what I was saying before about the lack of time for reflection. So if you are communicating with a student and they don't have the time to process what you're saying and they feel rushed, like they need to keep up with the conversation, if they get any misunderstandings from what you've what you've been saying, or if it's just really hard to sometimes, I guess, present the information in a way that you can make sure that the student understands. If there's some sort of miscommunication there, then that can not be good for learning. One study actually found that students reported that they often got lost in synchronous chats, that they often couldn't keep up with what was being said, but they still liked them. So they couldn't keep up with it all the time, but they still liked the chats, which I thought was an interesting thing. But like I said before, the whole reason that any of this works is you need to have a teacher presence, and active learning strategies are paramount to their success. So what we did was we tried to sort of harness the best of both worlds. We had an ample amount of discussion forums that the students, which were available from the start of term, but the students could be posting in them, and they did use them a lot. In fact, we hired teaching assistants just to answer particular forums, and that was brought up in the end of term surveys, that the students really liked how on top of the forum posts that the staff were, which was really good. And on the right here, I've got a table outlining the synchronous sessions that we offered the students. So for Physics 1A, which is the course that Liz was talking about, our big first year physics course, we offered 2 hours a day, one at 10 a.m. and one at 4 p.m, synchronous sessions with lecturers. In some of the smaller courses, we offered 1 or 2 hours a day, maybe a couple of times a week. And so these first 2 sessions with lecturers were kind of more for content help. And then we offered another session just for lab help with tutors. And that was also twice a day at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then we offered just general help across most of the first year courses, our tutoring help. And these were 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. And that's because these sessions were face-to-face. A tutor would actually be in a room on campus. And so when we moved that online, we made that a synchronous session as well. So as you can see, we have help from 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 2, 2 to 3, and 4 to 5 every day for students in Physics 1A. So you would think that, you know, that is quite a lot of help for them. Whether that's too much help it's probably a valid point. Now, the tool that we used to put these sessions online was Blackboard Collaborate. It integrates really nicely with Moodle, and we just wanted everything on the same platform, but much of the functionality that you get with Blackboard Collaborate, you get with other software as well, such as Zoom and Teams. And basically what we wanted to do was share whiteboards, and I've got a screen capture over here. You can share the whiteboards, share an application or a screen, share files. I didn't use polling or breakout rooms, but that's something I'll go into towards the end. But essentially we just wanted to share the whiteboards, and we had tablets, and we could just write when students had questions, we could essentially just write on the screen. And in fact, I found also the share screen really useful, because I could make students moderators, and I had a couple of students trying to explain something to me about a file that they had, and I just couldn't work out what they were trying to say. And so I made them a moderator, and I got them to share their screen, and I fixed the problem like that. It was so easy once I could see their screen, but before then, it was 10 minutes of back and forwards. Like, I just don't know what you're saying to me. So the way that we got students to access these sessions is via a guest link. And a guest link means that you can allow students from any course, not just from the course where you've set up the Collaborate session. Anyone can access it, and it allows for them to be anonymous, which is a good thing, I think, and a bad thing. I mean, it's a good thing in that they don't feel like, you know, if they ask silly questions or if they say something, that we're going to be able to identify them. But it does make it a bit awkward when they name themselves something really strange, like, for example, a lot of people would call themselves guest, and then when they jumped into the Collaborate session, I would greet them by saying, "Hello, guest. Do you have any questions?" Which was a bit strange. So that's the only bad thing with it. So here I'm presenting some data about our attendance for these sessions. So here, this is the Physics 1A, just general content sessions that we had at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. So I have 10 a.m. in blue, 4 p.m. is in the orange, and we started these from halfway through week 5, and these are all the different sessions that we had. So each day should have 2 colors. Unless there was no one turned up, then there would be there's no bar here. So for example, Tuesday week 9, no one turned up at 10 a.m. And I should say in week 11 we didn't actually run the 10 a.m. sessions. So it started off kind of popular, dropped off a little bit, and the 4 p.m. session was slightly more popular than the 10 a.m. session, which is probably unsurprising. Students don't like getting up very early. Between both of these sessions, though, I went into the logs, and they stayed on average in both of the sessions. Students would stay on average around 25 minutes in the session for a 1-hour session, which is not too bad. There's no real sort of, I guess, trend as to when they would turn up. It kind of ebbs and flows. There's more trends in the next slides, as you'll see. So this is I think this is lab. So I can't see it because I've got some sort of like option up there. Anyway, so this is the lab help session, I believe. So this was at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And we started these from Monday of week 6. So 11 a.m. blue, 2 p.m. is orange, and we can see there is clearly there's clearly trends here. So 2 p.m. was also favoured a little bit more than what 11 a.m. was, and we had our labs due on Sunday of every week, and you can see here that there is a clear spike. All of these spikes here are at the ends of the weeks. So these are all on Fridays. And Mondays are really quiet days. So that's sort of unsurprising. On average, students for these 1-hour sessions, students would stay roughly between 35 and 38 minutes in the session. And now for our 2-hour duty tutoring sessions. Here I've got attendance in the blocks. I've completely lost my train of thought. And the line shows the duration, the average duration for that session. So on average, between 6 and 7 people per 2-hour session. And for the 2-hour session, though, students would stay on average almost an hour, around 55 minutes they would stay in the session. Interestingly, the sessions with lower attendance would often see the highest duration of attendance because people were monopolizing the tutor that was there, which was interesting. So some success stories and takeaways, I guess, from our move to online. Although the uptake wasn't huge relative to the number of total enrollments in the course, we found that there were several students who found them really useful. And some trends that we found in the sessions was, we would have the same students turning up to each session. Some students would arrange to meet at the same time every week to speak about a particular topic. And also several students logging on to a session to say thank you for the help that term. They didn't have any questions, they just wanted to log on and say thanks for your help, which I thought was really nice. I now have some quotes from some of the end of term surveys for some students, and they sort of hark back to what I was saying at the beginning. And so I've sort of grouped them into kind of themes. So here we've got one on the importance of teacher interaction. I've kind of removed all identifying information. But the students said, when dealing through Blackboard Collaborate numerous times, they were clear in their understanding and would continue to explain until they were certain I understood. Very helpful despite the challenges of physics being online. So I thought that was really nice. Also, there was a comment about the immediate support people got. The lab help sessions and general help sessions on Blackboard Collaborate were very useful if you were stuck on any questions. Also about fostering collaboration and connection, being able to collaborate with people from other classes with physics content and homework. They liked that. And also just general student support. The lectures and the amount of support from lecturers and course coordinator was a great help in making the transition to online. And so I guess the takeaways from moving these tutorials online is that we couldn't expect the uptake to be significant when we introduced them midterm. I'm going to be interested to see what the uptake is like next term when we introduce them from the beginning of term. But for a small amount of our effort, we helped students who genuinely wanted to learn. While there weren't too many of them, we actually really helped them. And I think that really increased their motivation for studying physics in general, which would increase their course satisfaction and, you know, in general, their learning grades for physics. I think also the online sessions sort of present a lower barrier for student attendance. So it's kind of really easy to log on and be sort of an anonymous lurker and being like, oh no, I don't have any questions. Like I just wanted to see what questions other people have. So I thought that was really interesting. And also, I think moving forward for sessions where attendance is higher, we might actually try breakout rooms. Even if it's just 2 breakout rooms of say like 7 or 8 people, and that way I sort of looked at the attendance, but it was hard to tell if people were logging on and then not getting help and then logging back off again. So if we can try and reduce that by maybe going into breakout rooms, I think that would be good. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Kate.
It's okay.
That was really interesting, even for us who are at UNSW, getting that deep insight into what was happening with the online tutorials. So do we have any questions?
It's actually super interesting looking through all the Collaborate data just to see, how long people were spending on sessions and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it's really valuable to actually go through that analysis. Yes, Manju, you have a question.
So in our tutorials, we actually had breakout rooms because we had students who had been attending the tutorials beforehand and the labs beforehand. They were already working in teams of 4. So when they turned up, we put them into a waiting room. And then the tutor would go up there, that we had a tech supervisor would go up there and assign them. So they would be in the tech, in the same groups that they were on in the face-to-face. And then when they opened up the breakup rooms, you saw the same 4 people. And the students actually came back and they said that they turned up each week because they could see the same faces. And this thing that Kate had said about the social connecting, and because they had connected in week 1 on the face-to-face sessions, they continued to see the same number of students. And this was true for the labs too. Consequently, one of the students or students in the AISHA survey actually came back and said that the reason why they kept coming up every week was because they could connect with a team of people. Right. And I think that's the power of the synchronous. You have the students who are a bit disorganized, and in the same way as they don't turn up to the face-to-face labs and so on, they may over time, once the excitement of this situation goes away, will not log on as well. So the structured motivated will actually learn irrespective of what you offer. The structure provides and the social connection provides the behavioral and emotional connection for them to tag on, and then the cognition going. So Aisha might like to comment on that, the student who said that. Aisha?
Yeah, the one comment that particularly was interesting was the student commenting he or she liked to come in to see the tutors because they thought that tutors were really helping them. I think that's the one, Manju, that we talked about.
Yes. And that stuck, and that feedback, the fact that you do come in because you know somebody's there waiting for you, that obligation. Yep. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. We also have a comment here from Shannon, Kate, about, it was really interesting to see that data. And so keeping that in mind, and taking the opportunities we have to share such data, which we normally, you know, if we do engage with it, we just have a look at it ourselves. It's valuable. Now, I wanted to ask whether you had a look into what fraction of the student body actually access the synchronous sessions at some point.
It's really hard to say. So for the I haven't looked exactly what fraction. It would be hard for, say, a shared course, because it's really hard to know, for example, where they're coming from, because they are coming in anonymously. And I was also thinking about, you know, so for example, my comment on we had the same people turning up, that's only from my experience and from talking to other people, because it's really hard to know in the logs who turned up, because you have the guest name that they had there, but you don't know if they kept using that again and again. So it was yeah, so it's kind of really hard. But no, I haven't gone in and actually looked at, say, percentage of numbers. I just know, you know, we had several hundred enrollments and we were only getting on average, you know, 10 people turning up, 6 people turning up.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, we've reached the hour. Did you have one more question, Angie?
Can I?
Yeah.
Hogging the space, no one else has questions. So I think the other thing was, so did they log on via their Canvas login or their Moodle login, or did they have a separate link? Because for us, we set up a Zoom session in Canvas and they have to log on to Canvas and they come in with their ID. And then we ask them to log on with the enrollment name so we can put them in and give their preferred name. We can put them into the same groups, breakout rooms that they were in before. Because you cannot have both. You cannot have privacy and you cannot look after them individually. There is a tension. And if you want one, you've got to give the other one up. Right.
Yeah. We, because, the way that we set up Collaborate, one of the Collaborate sessions, the duty tutoring sessions, is we wanted to make it available to other courses as well. And we wanted everyone to jump into the same session. And the only way we could do that with Collaborate is by setting up a guest link, because you can only access sessions within your course. So then we just did that for all of them. But I know, for example, the way that Christine set up her sessions in term 2 is she's just put the Collaborate link, so students will actually log in and actually have their ID, like she'll be able to identify them. But we didn't have that for term 1, but we could in term 2.
Thank you. I think we might close this sort of formal recorded session now. All right, well, on that note, I would like to say thank you very much to our presenters today, Liz Angstman, Manju Sharma, and Kate Jackson, and to all of you for attending. If you would like to access a recording of today's seminar, please visit our Perfect website on www.perfect.physics.unsw.edu.au as on the screen. Thank you.